Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Welcome to episode 19. In this episode, I interviewed Josh Griffin, the former high school pastor at Saddleback Church. And Josh and I talk about Download Youth Ministry, something he and Doug Field started a few years ago, and that he recently transitioned out of Saddleback, his role there, to work with DYM full time. So anybody that leads in student ministry and youth ministry is familiar with DYM, and Doug and I talk about teaching students. We talk about it kind of from start to finish. What does it look like to plan what you want to teach students in a year? And then how do you plan each series and all the way to the point where you're actually teaching? What are some tips as you get up in front of students and teach? And I just think they're great tips really for teaching in any environment. So if you lead in children's ministry, this would be helpful to you as well. The show notes can be found at nickblevins.com/episode 19. And before we jump into the interview, I just want to remind you that if you're interested in joining a monthly video call with some other ministry leaders who are in the same context as you, right? So if you're a next-gen pastor or student pastor, or maybe an elementary director, if you're interested in a monthly video call for 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours where you can learn from everybody else that's on the call, think 8 or 10 people or so, no more than that for sure, in what's called a mastermind format where people share what's going well in their ministry, what they need help with from the group, and what resource they can share. If you're interested in that, I've done a couple of those. They've been really helpful, and I'm just looking to pilot some of those groups to see what might come of it, because I think that's something that a lot of us could benefit from if we jumped in. So if you're interested in that, go to nickblevins.com/mastermind. Goofy name, I know. That's just the name of the group, or at least the style, the format, and kind of all those questions. So check that out. If you're interested, sign up, and we'll see if we can get some groups launched. But let's jump into this interview with Josh Griffin. Well, today I'm talking with Josh Griffin. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Nick. I appreciate it, man.
Well, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, and we'll talk a little bit more, too, about the transition to Download Youth Ministry and all that stuff. But maybe leading up to that, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. Well, I've been in youth ministry for 20 years, and I spent 8 years in Michigan as a youth pastor. So right out of Bible college, straight to my first church, the only church I ever interviewed with or candidated at or whatever. And they said yes. I don't know what they were thinking, but I stayed there for 8 years. And then have served the last 12 years in a bunch of different capacities at Saddleback Church in California, where I live now. And most recently was the high school pastor there. Took over for a guy named Doug Fields. He's kind of written and done everything there is in youth ministry.
Just some guy.
Just some guy. No
easy
pressure.
To follow. Yeah, easy to follow.
Yeah, it's just like Yoda, just following Yoda. It's no big deal. Just the master Jedi. And then that's me. So yeah, I have 4 kids. My wife Angela and I met in college, and she's an amazing wife, and she's a nurse and a mom. And then so in my house of my 4 kids, I have 2 teenagers now. I have a high schooler and a junior higher, and 2 more close behind. So look out, world.
That's awesome. I saw you tweeted something about the high school ministry winter retreat and having to sign up, and then you tweeted something like, "I might be that parent who needs a favor." That was awesome.
I've done youth ministry for so long, and in all fairness, I've just sometimes looked at parents like, "What? Come on, just sign your kids up and don't miss deadlines and all that, and pick up your kids on time." And I missed a deadline, and I didn't get my kids signed up, and now the event's sold out, and I can't go. And the other day, this is a true story. I was. My son, Christian, he called and said, "Dad, where are you?" And I was like, "I don't know, I'm at home or whatever." He's like, "You were supposed to pick me up 45 minutes ago." And so I roll over to this youth group event as the former youth pastor, now picking up his kid almost an hour late.
That is awesome.
I have such a deeper appreciation for parents, and I have so much more respect for them. As a young youth pastor, they were so frustrating to me. And now I think I'd be a pretty good youth pastor now, because I understand a lot more as a dad of teenagers. Oh my goodness.
That's right. That's not good for Christian, but it's pretty funny everywhere else.
It's so bad for him, but it's
Oh,
sorry,
man,
buddy.
that's awesome. So you stepped out of that, and you and Doug and some others have helped start this Download Youth Ministry. But how many years has it been now since you stepped out of your role at Saddleback?
It's actually really fresh. So I'm only 4 months into that whole process.
I was thinking a year or so.
Yeah. No. I've been a part of Download Youth Ministry. Doug Fields, a buddy Matt, and I started it almost 4 years ago, just on a whim. We were at a conference together, and Doug was teaching, and Matt was on a panel, and I was doing a workshop or something. And we said, you know what, there needs to be a website that allows youth workers to share the best stuff that they've created and do it really cheap and only downloadable, like no shipping, no warehouse, no nothing. And by the end of that conference that we were all three at, we built it. And, technology's gotten really easy for e-commerce and whatever. And so this idea that we've been cooking around for a long time just kind of happened. And then, people were like, man, Download Youth Ministry came out of nowhere. And I would say, well, yeah, we've been working on it for 4 years. So every day.
Yeah. Well, and it's been, and I've definitely heard of it that whole time too, but I didn't realize the transition for you to it full time was so fresh.
Yeah, it's very fresh. And that was a really tough challenge. I kind of viewed myself as a quarterback and as a youth pastor and on the field and calling the plays. And I've done that for 20 years. And I've moved to a new role. I no longer play quarterback. I feel like now I'm a coach. Now maybe I'm a trainer. I don't know. Maybe too heavy to be a trainer. But I'm still in the game. I'm still playing, but I'm not necessarily on the field. I might be a little more in a sideline role right now. And I understand some of that tension of, players that just want to stay in the game. And I certainly do too. But, I get to speak in our youth group, and I'm at a bunch of youth events, but, it's a new role for me. It's a new role to help encourage youth workers, to train youth pastors, and then primarily Download Youth Ministry is resourcing youth workers, and that has been really, really fulfilling and awesome. So, yeah.
So even though it's only been 4 months or whatever that you've done it full time, like you said, you've done it for a few years. Is there anything you've learned that was, new or surprising about what youth leaders need? Because you've been connected in the community, obviously, for a long time. But have you learned anything new with Download Youth Ministry specifically? Yeah,
I would say now being closer to DYM and it being my full-time job, I would say I'm amazed at the diversity of youth ministry that's out there. Like, I kind of stereotype most churches as having a full-time youth worker and a modest youth budget and, 35 kids. And that could not be further from the truth. Like, I have met amazing youth workers now all over the world, all over the country that are, it's a mom who volunteers and runs the youth ministry with 8 kids. And it's a retired gentleman who is just saw a need in his church and stepped up and is paying for it out of his own pocket. And so is really happy that most of the resources on Download Youth Ministry are $3 too. It's just fun to go, my goodness, youth ministry is not one thing. It is all over the place. It is it's just so diverse and so exciting to just watch all these different types of youth pastors, ages, personalities, ethnicities, genders, all that, serving faithfully in the kingdom. So my worldview, my youth ministry worldview has exploded with the great stuff that's being done by all sorts of different people all over the country.
Cool. Have you seen any different challenges that you see youth leaders are facing, especially now that maybe that's expanded in your view of it, and how they could overcome it?
Yeah, I think training is probably one of the number one needs in youth ministry. We have some really big events for youth workers, but they just aren't attended by this other segment of youth ministry. The full-time youth workers go into a conference and they're a ministry professional, but that mom or that senior citizen that's helping run the youth group is not getting that training. And so one of the things that we've been really working on is providing video training by Doug Fields or myself, whatever, to really help equip youth workers that are in the trenches of youth ministry. What we're finding is most youth pastors, most youth workers are volunteer, and they don't have significant budgets, and they don't have significant training. And they don't really have a way to get that. And so we're providing that. And obviously you're doing things like that too with podcasts and whatnot too, which is awesome. but we're really seeing, we're trying to raise the training level of youth workers. And we've got some cool new stuff coming out soon that'll help do that too.
That's cool. Is there anything that you can share about what's coming down the road with DYM, and especially with you giving it full time and all that now?
Yeah, I guess. We haven't talked about it yet, but we're working on, I don't know if I can even say this. I'm just going to say it. We're working on.
Hey, this won't release for like 5 or 6 weeks. You'll probably be fine.
Okay, I hope so.
Who knows how many people are listening anyway? It's great. Give us all the secrets.
We're about to release Download Youth Ministry University. And the idea is, for just a small fee, you can sign up for youth ministry training courses. And there's going to be stuff on, urban ministry, relational youth ministry. We're doing like a 101, like a basics of youth ministry track. We're even redoing purpose-driven youth ministry, and we've rewritten that. That's one of Doug's most popular and famous books that he's ever written. We're doing a veterans track. So we're shooting and writing a ton of new video curriculum that for just a few bucks, you can take a whole course and learn how to do youth ministry. So there you go. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler, that's awesome. I think it's really needed as well, like you said. So that's really cool. That you just reminded me, Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry was the first ministry book I ever read years and years ago. I mean, I'd read Purpose-Driven Church, but I was serving in youth ministry. And so that was the first kind of real practical hands-on. It was, excellent. So do you picture DYM University? Obviously it's geared mostly towards, the lead person, whether it's volunteer or staff. Do you ever see that expanding to like their teams too? Courses on small group leading or, whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I would say while some of our initial offerings might lean a little bit towards a full-time youth worker, I would say the vast majority are going to be to the volunteer. So, hey, for $10, you can take this 6 to 10 session course, and there's questions, and we might even do some certificates or stuff. Where, everybody in our youth group is going to go through this basic training. Everybody, rather than have, a youth pastor trying to create all this stuff too, we're going to provide him or her with some great resources. They can just say, hey, go to Youth Ministry University and grab this course. It's $8 or $12, whatever. And you're going to be trained on youth ministry now. So yeah, I think volunteers are going to be the biggest beneficiary of it.
That's good. I see just in the church overall, there seems to be a lot of churches trying to do a better job with training, make it more like digital, accessible, and even create kind of a path of sorts where people can, almost like college in a sense, like university, taking one after the other to continue to grow and learn. That's really cool. We've just seen that most youth pastors just aren't going to go, or youth workers, I should say. Youth pastors maybe have a seminary education or Bible college, whatever. But most youth workers don't, and they're not going to. Yeah. And even a conference, that's a one-time thing, and it's hundreds or even thousands of dollars by the time you factor in airfare and hotel and whatever. Well, for $10, you could take a great course from some of the greatest minds in youth ministry. So I think it's going to take off. I think it's going to be huge. And most importantly, it's going to trickle down to our students. The better, well-trained leaders are going to create better small groups. They're going to be better weekend leaders. They're going to be better, they're going to move from chaperones to really shepherds of our students. And so, I think training is absolutely the key. That's awesome. I'm excited. We want to talk a little bit about something you'll probably do some training on, which is teaching. Yeah. But I'd love to hear what tips and recommendations you have, or maybe even what it looked like for you at Saddleback as you planned what to teach students, that next year, and how you made that plan, and what did you teach on? What did you, because you can't teach everything. So I'd love to hear about that. What did that look like for you? Absolutely. Well, I would say, first of all, we start with the stuff that we teach on every year. So every single year in our youth ministry, just at the highest level of creating a series or creating a teaching calendar, is we go, what are we going to teach on again this year? Or what's so important, we're going to cover it another year in a row. And for us, that is, we talk about relationships and parents, which again feels like relationships. We talk about sex every year in our youth ministry. And we also try to
to cover an entire book of the Bible every year in our youth group too. So we don't just focus on like, what are the topics that students need to hear? We also go, as far as, biblical wisdom and discipleship, we want to make sure that they're covering good, big chunks of the scripture as well. And so for us, an example with that would be, we'll do a series called Facebook Official. And that talks about, friendships, relationships, and dating, sex, that kind of stuff. Then we'll do a series on parents called How to Raise Your Parents, or, The Parent Trap, or whatever that might look like. And then we'll do a series on the Bible. We pick a book called, we'll just say James, and we'll call it 5 Ways to Be Awesome. That's what we did this summer. And it was one lesson from each chapter, and kind of just packaged it as a series, 5 Ways to Be Awesome. So that's an example of where I would start. And then I would go, okay, where do those best fit in? And, relationship series is a great series to put in the fall. You've got all your students coming back, and it's back to school, it's back to church. And so put a really strong felt needs series right away in the fall. We always talk about relationships in the fall. Maybe you'd want to save talking about sex or something else for maybe the spring. Around Valentine's Day is a little cliche, or prom is a little expected. But it's also a time that they're thinking about those topics. And it's a time when typically youth ministry attendance dips a little bit. And so bringing back a strong topic like that could be interesting, either in January, right in the new year, or maybe in the spring sometime. We've varied it. We've tried all different series at all different times of the year, and they all work. But I think we've kind of found a pattern: relationships in the fall, sex in the spring, and then a book study over the summer has been really effective in our ministry as well.
And then once you kind of plot all those out with the extra time, that's probably where you figure out something unique that's not exactly a yearly teaching, right?
Yeah, that's when we just do a brainstorm. I like to grab a couple volunteers, a couple of students, and just get in a room and just whiteboard every idea that we can come up with. So what's happening in pop culture, what's happening in our society. I even like to ask questions like, what's happening in your school? And, tell me what's going on. What are you struggling with? What are you hearing? Because oftentimes students in that brainstorming are going to have some really good insight that you just simply don't have. So we kind of start to fill in the cracks. So, we've got our main calendar. We know when youth group's going to be, and we have our holidays and our retreats put in. Then we start putting in our big series that we do every year. And then we just start dropping in a few more series here and there to kind of round out the teaching calendar. Now, not every youth ministry does this, but I also like to put a break between each series. So I like to throw in a one-off that's just something that I have personally really want to teach on, or maybe God's really spoken and really shaped me on. We also do some really creative one-offs. We do one called Stories Weekend. Our youth group meets on the weekend. And Stories Weekend is where we simply have testimonies, people that get up and share some prepared thoughts and remarks, of what God's doing in their heart. And they're all different. They're all over the place, but you put 6 of those in one service, and that becomes the message, or maybe 3 of those, whatever. And it's so powerful and so strong. So I kind of like taking a break between series as well. I think it's just helpful. And just as a tip on the side, I would say don't let your series become more than 5 weeks or even 4 weeks. To me, that sweet spot is kind of 3, maybe 4 weeks long, especially if your small groups or your Sunday school is using the same curriculum or the same topic. You're just going to, at some point, have topic fatigue. And even the most interesting topic gets pretty brutal after you've been at it for a couple of months. So don't let your series go too long.
That's good. That's good. So for someone who's listening that hasn't planned this way, the first step probably is to identify what are your core teachings, right? That you're going to do every year. What are those topics, and then go from there. That's helpful.
Yeah, identify your core teachings, and then identify topics that you're passionate about, or maybe in an alignment with your church, which would be a great move for a full-time youth worker especially, is go, hey, what is our church doing, and where can I bring alignment with where our pastor, where he or she is taking us? Like, that would be a really wise thing to go, okay, our church is really talking about serving a lot this year, and this is kind of our theme verse for the year, whatever the church has decided. Well, throw some alignment in there, and that will serve you really, really well. Obviously, you're trying to create a youth ministry that is part of a church. And if your teaching calendar is totally independent of that, you got to be really careful, because pretty soon you could be on a totally different page than where your leadership is taking you. So if you think about your youth ministry as part of a whole, I think it'd be wise to put some alignment in there. Now, I'll just keep it real here. Our church doesn't do a great job of planning the adult services very far in advance. And I like to know about a year out what at least the topic is going to be. I don't have to have the exact name of the series, or I certainly am not writing messages ahead. I'm barely week on, I love it when someone from a church is like, yeah, we're 4 months out. And I'm like, yeah, you're not realistic. That is so silly. And probably a lie. But anyhow, I like to know where we're headed. And part of the reason I do that too is, and I wish our big church did that. They just don't. So alignment is really tough for me, with our adult services. But let me just take one step back. The reason I want to know where our youth ministry is heading for the year is because I'm a collector. And as a communicator, I am constantly collecting things that I could use in a sermon. So an example would be, okay, I'm doing 5 Ways to Be Awesome next summer. It's literally 11 months away. But I know I'm going to be teaching about lying, or the power of the tongue, or something from the book of James, right? So if I stumble across a YouTube video and I'm like, that would be perfect. The reason I'm making those connections is because I know what I'm teaching on. Even if it's 11 months away, I at least know the sentence that is the basis for my message. So I'm going to grab that YouTube video and put it in my 5 Ways to Be Awesome folder. And when I finally do get around to writing that message or thinking about that series more, which is, again, months from now, I've collected a pretty good selection of, this article from USA Today, this podcast that I listened to, this video from YouTube. All of a sudden, my message is like half written because I've done a good job of collecting things. So I think it serves youth workers, really children's youth workers, adults, whatever. It serves you really well to know where you're headed, because you're going to end up collecting a lot of really great data and examples and illustrations months ahead of time.
That's good. Yeah, I know I'm a lot better with illustrations if I've had all that time to stew on it.
Yeah, exactly.
One time when I was going to be teaching the main service, the series was still the same, but my specific topic changed. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I've had a lot of good ideas the last 3 months. You're just throwing out all my good stuff. So once you have that plan, I'd love to hear you talk about how you then, teach it, prepare and teach and engage students, but also maybe with the volunteer in mind. Because I think that's one thing that maybe we could do better in youth ministry is using other volunteer leaders to teach, but then equipping them, like helping them along the way. Sometimes we just throw them out there. Good luck. How do we help them and ourselves engage students more when we teach?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, I think there's a couple big things I'd address right away. One is the length of the message. And there is no right answer. I mean, I teach whole workshops on creating engaging talks. And one of the first things I ask is, what's the perfect length to a message? And there isn't one. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, but there isn't a perfect length, and they vary. And certain topics require more attention and more time. And so, it feels to me like, though, you do need to know your audience and then plan your message length accordingly. And the cardinal rule is that we just don't want to go too long. You don't want to lose your audience or lose the power of your message because you went too long. Now, for me, that's right around 30 minutes. Sometimes it could be a little longer, could be a little shorter. But for me, that sweet spot is 30, 33 minutes with high school students. I think with junior hires, probably be a little bit less. With adults, maybe it could be a little more. But I think if you can't say it in a half an hour, then you didn't plan well. You didn't prep your message. And, I see people get up there all the time and they're basically just winging their message. And they're like, oh, the Holy Spirit will lead me. And I just kind of shake my head and go, I don't know. Is the Holy Spirit even here today? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, he didn't lead you in the preparation process.
That's right.
Because,
That's right.
yeah.
And I am all for God's Spirit leading us. I am. But I feel like he can lead us through the week as we prep our talks and as we edit and as we cut and as we trim and as we prepare in general. So I think you need to identify your audience, figure out how long they can handle the topic as well. And then the other thing is, so don't drone on and on. Or I guess you could be a senior pastor if you want to do that.
Nice. That was well played.
Yeah, youth pastor, got to take a shot. And then the other one is however long it is, you got to keep it engaging. And so for me, I have a list of literally more than 30 tools that I use to engage the students as they listen to the message. An example would be, humor. So funny pictures or a funny video. That's simple. In my preparation, I go, okay, students have been sitting for 7 minutes. What do they need? They need a break, kind of like a television commercial. They just need to take a break for a second and then re-engage. So every 7 minutes in my message, I want to create a moment of laughter, a moment of pause, a moment of relief. And then I want to do that every 7 minutes through the course of the talk. So if the talk's about a half an hour, I'm going to do that maybe 4 times or so. So it could be something as simple as a really engaging story. Or a failure story works really well. Students will love when you mess up. They're like, oh, this guy is an idiot, just like me. And so it helps them, listen and pay attention. It could be really significant. Like one youth worker I know likes to use a song or music in the middle of her message. And I think that's great because it pauses the message. It creates engagement. It divides it into 2 halves. Think of it like halftime in a football game or whatever. 7th inning stretch, if it might be needed.
Like baseball?
Exactly. Yeah, whatever analogy you need. But I think, man, just divide up your talk into chunks and go, how do I create engagement every so often? One of my favorite tools is a testimony. I was coaching a youth worker. Her name was Heather this week. And I was like, you've done a really good job of creating this message. What would it look like if in the last third of the message, you brought up a student from your youth group and had him share about exactly what you're teaching about, but now as a real life example? And what's so cool? When you teach, teenagers are listening to you and they're respectful and, hopefully you don't see the soft glow of their phone in their faces while you're talking. But what's so cool is when a teenager gets up to speak. My whole youth group, they just stare intently. They listen at full attention because a peer is up there on speaking. So if you want to increase engagement and attention, put a testimony up there, put a student up there, throw up a volunteer. Even, that would be another technique, would be to use other voices. So oftentimes, I made this mistake early in youth ministry. I thought because the church paid me to do youth ministry, I was supposed to be the primary or only communicator. And I think that's pretty naive. And it also, it discourages good attention if you're the only communicator. So bring a volunteer up to teach every once in a while, or bring a volunteer to teach a point in the middle of your talk. That could be very effective. Other voices, I am white, I am 40 years old, and I am male. Well, man, our students need to hear more. And I became a Christian at an early age. Our students need more than white, middle-aged, male, Christian from a kid. They need more stories than that. They need more perspectives than that. And I promise you, when you invite those other people in, engagement is going to go through the roof. So there's tons of techniques, great sources of engagement that I think you can develop. I'll throw out a couple more random ones just for kicks. One is use a sense other than ears. So typically people are maybe looking at you, but they're definitely listening to you when you give a message. Well, what would it look like if you could involve the sense of taste, right? That feels very unusual in church that you would involve the sense of taste. Well, Jesus did that with communion. He established communion at the Last Supper, and there is a taste engagement, a taste memory there. Well, I've taken that principle in a very, very simple way. The one time I was teaching on, what really satisfies in life. And I used the example of how Snickers satisfies, but only for a while. And so I gave everybody a little fun size Snickers. Cost me $5. And in the middle of my message, everyone gets candy. I should have done it maybe towards the end of my message because when the sugar kicked in.
yeah, that's true.
But, now every time they, see a Snickers bar or see that Snickers really satisfies or whatever, they know. And the label on the candy bar even said Snickers satisfies. And I said, students, you know what? As you're eating this candy today, I want you to know that Snickers does satisfy, but you're going to be hungry again soon. And there's only one thing that truly will satisfy the longing of your soul, and that's Jesus Christ. And all of a sudden, their taste buds have increased engagement. There's some great books and resources on this too. Like obviously, Speaking to Teenagers by Doug Fields and Duffy Robbins would be a great book to read. Made to Stick is a business book, but it's a really, really great book about getting messages that are retained later. That I think would be, it's a secular book, but it's really, really good stuff too. Yeah. As a communicator, too, you're going to be judged by your audience in the blink of an eye. And so Malcolm Gladwell has a book, it's kind of an older book now, called Blink, that is really, really good too, about how your audience is thin slicing you and making judgments about who you are as a communicator in the first few seconds. So anyhow, there's a lot of great resources out there, but just don't be boring. I think it's a sin to have something as incredible as the gospel of Jesus Christ and we make it boring or painful. Don't do that. It's too important of a message to let that happen. So spend some time really crafting your message and making it really engaging.
Yeah, definitely. We'll link to those books in the show notes too. That'll be helpful. Well,
excellent.
If somebody wants to, hear more, connect with you, learn more, especially with DYM University coming out, what's the best way to do that? Absolutely.
Well, downloadyouthministry.com is kind of the headquarters for Josh and Doug these days. And then eventually DYM University will be coming out really soon, Download Youth Ministry University, and we'll have it all over our website. Also, just as an aside, what's so fun about Download Youth Ministry is that everything's inexpensive, and we're trying to provide things that no one has provided anywhere before. So if you're looking for, training videos for your youth ministry, you can download them there. If you're looking for a game for this Wednesday night, you can download it there. If you're looking for hey, where do I start with vision and direction, and you can get it on Download Youth Ministry. The one guy goes, I love Download Youth Ministry for the games or for the sermons, but he said, my favorite resource is your letters. I write letters of recommendation for Eagle Scout or college or whatever. And we have a bunch of templates that you can get for $5 or whatever. And he's like, I love that resource. So there's tons of great stuff on downloadyouthministry.com. I definitely encourage you to check out the membership and very soon, DYM University too. Hey, there we go.
Yeah, it's great. We use it. And you even have apps you just came out with the Dugout app, which a lot of people have been talking about, which is really cool. So yeah, people need to go there. We'll link to that.
Yeah, please do. The Dugout app is a really cool, you can make prayer cards for your youth ministry, kind of like an adopt a child, make baseball cards. It's $10 and you can make all that you want. Really fun to see student pastors get behind that idea. That thing has been literally flying off the servers this week. We just released it and it's really, really cool. So I'm glad to hear that you like it too.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. I'm very, very honored and hope to connect with everybody on Twitter or Instagram or especially Download Youth Ministry.
Thanks, Josh. How about that? Getting a little teaser here on the podcast. Even though we recorded that some weeks back, they still have not kind of launched or talked about DYM University yet. So that's coming soon, but it's not out yet. But how cool is that? I just think anything that can help church leaders win, kind of like they say, they want to help youth workers win. Anything that can help do that, training they can provide, done for you content. I love all of that kind of stuff because as someone who, leads in a ministry and myself, I just love when I can go get something that will be helpful to me and I don't have to create from scratch. Maybe I can just tweak it and then use it. And with DYM University, I just think that training is so needed because a lot of people don't get the formal training, maybe in a seminary or Bible college or something like that. And even if you do, a lot of times some of the practical day-to-day, week-to-week things that are required just aren't covered there. So I'm really excited about DYM University. Here's some other action items I had coming out of that interview. One, of course, is to go to downloadyouthministry.com. If you serve in youth ministry or in student ministry, I'd be surprised if you haven't already used the site. We do. There's a lot of great stuff on there. Another thing is you can work on your teaching plan for students. So kind of take what we talked about and do that with your ministry. So take some time, plan a meeting or a couple meetings, and figure out what you want to teach students every year. What is something that you want repeated every year? It's going to be part of your core. He mentioned some of the things they do. So figure out what that is for you. And then plan out a year of teaching. Maybe you don't even know what your next series is, and so you're going to start now. You're going to plan a year. Or maybe you already have the rest of the school year planned. You kind of do this, and this is an opportunity to just go ahead and plan the next year and really get far out in terms of your preparation so that you can do the things like Josh mentioned and be thinking about it and saving ideas and all that kind of stuff. Another action item is you could read one of the books he mentioned. There were some great books he referenced there. They're in the show notes, and I'll mention that link in a moment. And then last, what if you applied some of the principles he talked about, right? Not teaching for more than 30 minutes, not going more than 7 minutes without some kind of interaction or break or something like that. What if you did some of that and then in a specific teaching and then came back after that teaching and debriefed it, get some people to give you some feedback, get some input, and see if it was different, see if they thought it was different. Like you didn't even have to tell them ahead of time that you changed things up or you were doing something that you hadn't done before. You can get all that information in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 19. Also, don't forget, if you're interested in joining a mastermind group, networking and learning from other leaders who serve in the same context as you, head to nickblevins.com/mastermind, sign up there, and I'll be in touch. In the next podcast episode, I talked to Nina Schmidgall, the family pastor at National Community Church in D.C. We talk about how to overcome some of the barriers and issues that exist when it comes to empowering women to lead in the church, both from leadership side and as women who are leading. She gives kind of thoughts and tips for both parties about how we can do that better. So you don't want to miss that. Subscribe. Be sure to subscribe. We love when you go on iTunes and rate and leave a comment. That really helps a lot. So I appreciate all of you who have done that. And that's it for this one. We'll see you in the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.